Hi guys, tonight we're stepping quietly into a world where whispers travelled further than facts and where everyday people held on to fragile beliefs just to make it through another uncertain day. This story will slowly guide you through the occupied years of World War II, through the rumours, hopes, fears and quiet convictions that ordinary men and women carried in their minds. Nothing loud, nothing dramatic, just the soft truth of how people believed, endured, and kept going. Before we get started, if you enjoy exploring hidden corners of history at a slower pace, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where in the world you're tuning in from. I'd love to connect with you there. In those early days of occupation, when everything familiar shifted into something foreign, many people found themselves clinging to the small explanations that helped them understand a world suddenly turned upside down. No one expected clarity. Instead, they searched for meaning in the smallest patterns. Some believed that the first cold wind after midnight meant another inspection would come soon, because soldiers always seemed to arrive when the air felt sharp and restless. Others watched the sky for signs they invented themselves, thinking that if the clouds moved low and slow, the day might remain quiet. These beliefs weren't the result of superstition in the usual sense. They were born from the need for a little control, a small anchor in a time when choices were few. People learned to read footsteps the way others read books. A heavy, dragging step on a wooden floor meant a tired neighbour returning from a long line for bread. But a quick, firm echo in the hallway meant officers were patrolling again. Families memorized these small sounds, repeating them to each other so no one would be caught off guard. Even children, who once listened for the jingle of an ice cream cart, now whispered about the rhythm of boots on cobblestones as if it were a secret language. Some households kept tiny rituals. A woman might light a lamp for exactly 3 minutes before blowing it out again, believing it would keep trouble away. A grandfather might tap the table twice before speaking of anything uncertain, as if those taps could steady the future. Though logically they knew these gestures held no real power, they offered comfort, the quiet illusion that danger could be softened by consistency. People believed in distant victories too, even before they had the proof. They imagined that somewhere beyond the horizon, someone was preparing to help them, someone strong enough to break the silence surrounding their towns. These thoughts weren't spoken loudly. They were kept warm like a candle in a cold room. Each night citizens leaned closer to one another, sharing gentle stories of hope that had no source except the longing in their chests. And so, as occupation settled into daily life, beliefs, small, personal and fragile, became the invisible threads holding communities together. People didn't need certainty. They needed something to cling to in the quiet, and these quiet beliefs became the compass by which they moved through each day. As days blended softly into one another, people began shaping new beliefs around the rhythm of occupation, building quiet mental maps that helped them navigate uncertainty without losing themselves. They noticed how silence behaved differently now, how mornings felt heavier, as if the air itself hesitated before letting anyone step outside. Many believed that if the street stayed unusually still right after sunrise, it meant soldiers had been nearby during the night. The hush that followed their presence seemed to cling to the walls, settling into the stones. Residents walked carefully through these suspended moments, trusting their instincts more than logic. Even the sound of a distant door closing became a marker of safety or risk, depending on its tone. A door gently pushed shut meant a neighbour trying not to draw attention, while a sharp slam suggested an argument or a sudden search. People interpreted these small noises the way one interprets weather forecasts, not because the predictions were accurate, but because they offered a sense of direction. By then, food shortages were growing slowly but steadily, and belief became a form of quiet endurance. Families convinced themselves that if they saved just one more slice of bread today, things would improve tomorrow. It didn't matter whether improvement was realistic. It mattered that saving the slice felt like choosing hope. Some mothers told their children that hunger arrived in waves and that every wave eventually weakened. Whether or not it was true, it gave the children something to hold on to when their stomachs felt empty. Older residents developed their own silent markers of change. They studied the faces of shopkeepers to understand the state of things. If the baker avoided eye contact, it meant flour shipments had been delayed again. If the butcher stepped outside to sweep the pavement more often than usual, it meant he was too anxious to stay indoors. These observations weren't always grounded in fact, but they made people feel connected, less blind to the forces shaping their daily lives. At night, many believed that the darkness itself offered protection. They blew out lamps early, not only to avoid attention, but because they thought the shadows could hide their fears. The absence of light made conversations softer, thoughts clearer. In those dim rooms, people created a world of gentle reasoning, telling themselves that as long as they shared the same space, whispered the same hopes, and stayed close to one another, the outside world couldn't fully break them. The occupation made time feel different too. Hours moved slowly during daylight, when uncertainty was most visible, but evenings passed quickly as families gathered in circles of warmth. People believed that if they talked long enough about ordinary things, recipes they remembered, stories from childhood, gardens they once tended, they could hold on to a little piece of their old lives. And for a moment, even if fleeting, they felt anchored. Many also developed quiet faith in strangers. A nod from someone passing by in the market could mean more than a full conversation. That small gesture was interpreted as reassurance, a way of saying, "I'm still here," without breaking the silence imposed by the times. These small acts, almost invisible, carried enormous meaning. They reminded everyone that despite the fear surrounding them, humanity still pulsed gently beneath the surface. And so, beliefs continued forming like thin layers of frost. Fragile, delicate, but persistent. Every day added a new layer, shaping how people moved, thought, and hoped within the narrow space allowed to them. As the occupation deepened and people adjusted to lives shaped by uncertainty, new beliefs continued to rise quietly, shaped not by superstition, but by the soft logic of survival. Many residents started trusting the rhythm of footsteps more than any official announcements. They believed that if they heard a slow, unhurried walk outside, it was most likely a neighbour returning home, and the night would remain peaceful. But if footsteps stopped abruptly, paused, or shifted direction, that hesitation alone became a quiet warning. People developed an instinct for these subtle cues, treating them as natural signals just as farmers once read the wind. The market, once full of chatter, became another place where silent interpretations replaced clear facts. People believed that if vendors stood very close to their stalls without offering greetings, it meant supplies were extremely low. If they whispered while exchanging goods, it suggested someone nearby was monitoring them. Searching for meaning in every gesture became its own survival tool. Even the way fabric hung on a clothesline could spark quiet theories. If a neighbour brought laundry inside unusually early, people believed a patrol might soon pass down the street. If laundry stayed out longer, it hinted that the day seemed calm enough. These tiny observations helped everyone feel less helpless, in a world that rarely gave direct answers. Letters, too, rare and precious, shaped beliefs about the larger world beyond the occupation. People cherished every envelope, even when the ink had faded or the message was brief. If a letter mentioned clearer skies, warmer days, or the sound of distant trains, families believed those signs meant movement somewhere. Maybe military shifts, maybe openings, maybe hope. Even a single hopeful sentence could become a small beacon carried quietly for weeks. Many people also developed a belief that certain moments of the day carried safer energy. Mid-afternoon, when the sun warmed the sides of buildings and shadows were short, felt like the gentlest time to step outside. They trusted that soldiers were less likely to appear during that golden stretch, as if sunlight itself softened the tension of the streets. Whether this held any truth didn't matter. The belief made people feel braver for a few minutes each day. Inside homes, families relied on routines that created the illusion of stability. Some believed that repeating the same sequence, closing shutters, checking locks, setting out a single candle, kept misfortune at bay. Others believed that speaking of sadness before nightfall would invite it inside, so hard conversations were saved for the calm quiet after dawn. These small rules weren't grounded in anything except the desire to preserve emotional balance. Friends and neighbours shared quiet signals too. A pot left on a windowsill could mean the street was safe. A curtain slightly overlapped instead of pulled straight might warn of a stranger nearby. These systems weren't written or spoken. They spread naturally, carried by glances and gentle habits. Even those who didn't fully believe in these signals followed them out of respect for the collective rhythm of survival. As weeks turned into months, people found themselves believing that if they managed to create one moment of peace each day, a warm drink, a short laugh, a memory shared, then the world outside couldn't fully take away their humanity. These small beliefs stitched themselves into daily routines until they felt as real as the occupation itself. Quiet guidelines, invented not out of fantasy, but out of the need to feel steady in a world that had become unsteady in every direction. As the occupied months unfolded into what felt like an endless, muted season, people continued forming gentle beliefs that helped them move through each day without losing themselves to fear. Many began to trust small, repeating signs in nature, details they might never have noticed before the war. Some believed that if birds gathered on rooftops earlier than usual, it meant the day would be quiet, as if the birds sensed calm before humans did. Others watched how the wind moved through alleyways. A steady breeze was seen as a good omen, while sudden stillness felt like a warning that someone unfamiliar might be approaching. These observations didn't offer certainty, but they gave shape to the slow flow of time. In the fields just outside town, farmers relied on old habits that had taken on new meaning. They believed that planting seeds in silence, without humming, without speaking, would keep watchful eyes away. When they walked home with empty baskets, they kept their steps measured, believing that moving predictably made them blend into the landscape. This quiet rhythm became a shield against the unpredictable presence of soldiers on country roads. In villages, the glow of a single lantern placed beside a door often carried unspoken meaning. People believed that if a lantern flickered low, the household wanted no visitors, not even friends. If its flame stood steady and bright, it meant those inside were safe for the moment, welcoming a soft knock. These signals knitted the community together with invisible threads, allowing connection without risking unnecessary noise. Some townsfolk, especially the elderly, created their own small rituals of reassurance. A man might place his boots in the same exact position by the door every night, trusting that this quiet act kept his family protected. A woman might stir her tea counterclockwise for luck, convinced that reversing the direction could bring unease. These gestures weren't superstitions in the traditional sense. They were anchors, subtle ways to feel grounded. Communication, too, shaped beliefs about hidden meaning. A brief nod from a neighbour at the well could signal that no strangers had been seen nearby. A quicker, shorter nod might mean someone suspicious had recently passed. People learned to read these micro-expressions the way they once read newspapers, interpreting each tiny movement with care. Children developed their own beliefs as well. They thought that if they stepped only on the lighter-coloured stones in the street, the day would stay peaceful. They believed that whistling could bring trouble, but humming softly could protect them. Adults rarely corrected these ideas. After all, children needed tools to navigate their world just as much as anyone else. Inside homes, mealtimes formed another layer of quiet belief. Families often shared whatever food they had at the same hour each evening, convinced that maintaining a steady routine kept spirits strong. Parents believed that if they spoke hopefully while eating, even if the hope was faint, it helped shape the atmosphere of the room. The soft glow of candles, the gentle scraping of spoons, the murmur of calm voices became a small sanctuary where worry dissolved, at least temporarily. People also believed that memories had a protective power. Before sleeping, they often whispered stories of the times before occupation, long summer evenings, bustling markets, laughter echoing from open windows. These recollections acted like warm blankets, wrapping the mind with familiarity. The stronger the memory, the more comfort it brought, giving people the sense that their former lives still existed somewhere inside them, waiting patiently to return. Over time, these beliefs wove themselves into every corner of daily life. They didn't change the reality outside, but they softened it. They made each day feel navigable, each moment slightly more bearable. And in a world where certainty had vanished, the simple act of believing, quietly, gently, in the privacy of one's own heart, became one of the most powerful ways to endure. As the occupation settled deeper into daily existence, people continued shaping soft beliefs that helped them quietly interpret the world around them. Many had begun to rely on the behaviour of ordinary objects as silent messengers of mood and safety. A chair left slightly angled near a doorway could suggest that someone had returned home in a hurry, while a chair pushed neatly under a table meant the day had passed calmly. People believed these small impressions carried clues about the emotional weather of households, allowing them to sense tension or relief without exchanging a single word. Even the smell of the streets became a kind of barometer. If the air carried the scent of freshly cut wood, residents believed it meant someone was preparing for long days indoors, perhaps expecting restrictions or sudden patrols. If the smell drifted from bakeries, faint but warm, people believed that supplies might have arrived somewhere, giving them quiet reason to stand a little taller. These gentle interpretations helped shape their understanding of the rhythm of each day, offering comfort where logic couldn't. Conversations became softer, more symbolic. People believed that discussing the past too colourfully invited melancholy, so they painted their memories in muted tones, just enough to remind themselves, not enough to overwhelm. When someone mentioned the sound of music from years before, they lowered their voices as if the memory itself needed shelter. And when a person spoke of a distant relative or a faraway friend, listeners believed the act of speaking their name brought a bit of that person's strength into the room. Homes transformed into spaces where beliefs lived quietly beside daily routines. A pot placed near a window was thought to bring stability. If steam rose slowly from it, families believed the day would unfold gently. If it rose quickly, swirling in sharp curls, they saw it as a reminder to move carefully, to avoid drawing attention. These small moments, though simple, gave residents the sense that the universe still communicated with them in subtle ways. Outdoors, people believed that shadows held meaning. A long shadow stretching across a courtyard might feel like a signal that evening was approaching safer ground, while short, sharp shadows under a bright midday sun felt tense, almost watchful. Many avoided walking directly through areas where shadows intersected, not because they feared anything mystical, but because they felt that staying clear of uncertain spaces kept their thoughts steady. In gatherings, brief quiet ones, neighbours often shared gentle theories about why certain days felt heavier than others. Some believed the air held memory, and that the towns themselves absorbed the emotions of those who walked through them. Others believed that calm days came in pairs, and if today felt peaceful, tomorrow would likely offer the same. These weren't predictions, they were ways of coaxing the mind into balance. Nights brought their own beliefs. People thought that if they settled into bed without rushing, allowing themselves to breathe deeply before closing their eyes, sleep would arrive more kindly. They believed that falling asleep with a hopeful thought, even a small one, shielded them from restless dreams. So each night families whispered simple reassurances, letting them float into the dimness like quiet lanterns. In this way, beliefs, soft, personal and steady, continued guiding people through the occupation. They didn't change the world outside, but they shaped the world within, giving everyone a way to hold on to themselves in a time when so much had been taken. As the occupation stretched on, people found themselves forming quieter, almost unseen beliefs that helped them understand the shifting mood of their surroundings. Many began paying closer attention to how mornings unfolded, believing that the first sound they heard each day set the tone for the hours ahead. If they woke to a single bird call, they considered it a soft sign of normalcy. If the first sound was the creak of a gate or hurried footsteps, they felt the day would require extra caution. These ideas weren't spoken aloud. They lived gently in the back of the mind, shaping how people approached the moment they stepped outside. Even the pattern of light across their floors became something to read. When sunlight stretched calmly through the window, forming long, steady shapes, residents believed the morning held a peaceful rhythm. But when the light arrived in sharp fragments, broken by clouds or shifting shadows, they took it as a reminder that unpredictability still hovered nearby. This quiet observation became its own ritual, an unspoken agreement with the day. People also developed a belief that the way bread was shared within a home reflected the emotional strength of the family. If slices were given evenly without hesitation, it meant spirits were steady. If someone lingered before offering their share, they believed it reflected a heaviness inside the household. This wasn't judgment, it was empathy, a soft recognition that everyone carried burdens differently. Water, too, had meaning. When someone filled a cup and the surface remained still, they believed calmness was returning. If ripples formed without clear cause, people thought it meant tension lingered in the air, and they moved more carefully. These interpretations helped them feel connected to something steady, as if the world still responded to their presence in delicate ways. Outside, the behaviour of stray animals shaped beliefs about safety. If dogs slept openly in the sunlight, people trusted that patrols were far away. If the animals paced or hid beneath stairways, residents took note, adjusting their steps accordingly. This simple reading of movement made the environment feel more understandable, less chaotic. In the evenings, the way smoke rose from chimneys held quiet significance. A thin, straight column of smoke felt reassuring, as if families throughout the town were breathing in unison, but smoke that bent sharply with sudden gusts made people pause, sensing that the night might bring unexpected activity. These small details became part of the collective language of endurance. Indoors, individuals held beliefs about the power of soft voices. They thought that speaking gently calmed not only the listener, but the speaker as well, as if lowering one's tone could settle the atmosphere inside a room. Whispered conversations, slow and careful, created pockets of peace that felt almost sacred in a time when loudness could invite trouble. People believed that ending the day with a small act of appreciation, a warm drink, a folded blanket, a quiet look out the window, helped the mind release tension. Even if nothing outside changed, these moments gave shape to hope, allowing it to sit quietly beside the uncertainty. Over time, these beliefs wove themselves into daily life, guiding people with subtle cues and soft intuition. They didn't solve the hardships of the occupation, but they gave everyone a way to gently navigate each day, holding on to a sense of meaning in a world that often felt stripped of explanation. As the occupation continued to shape every corner of daily life, people discovered new beliefs blossoming quietly inside the routines they tried to preserve. Many began trusting the rhythm of distant sounds, believing that the tone of a far-off church bell could reflect the emotional pulse of the town. If the bell's echo travelled smoothly, they felt a sense of hidden calm lingering in the streets. But if the sound wavered, fading unevenly through the air, they took it as a subtle sign that tension rested somewhere nearby. These interpretations became comforting, a way to understand the world without asking dangerous questions. People also believed that the way curtains moved held meaning. If a curtain swayed gently from a soft breeze, residents felt the day would pass without sudden disruption. If it snapped sharply due to a draft, they sensed that nerves would be tested. This quiet attention to fabric became another small ritual, an almost meditative observation that brought stillness to anxious moments. Even the arrangement of items in a room shaped beliefs. A book left slightly open on a table suggested that someone in the home held hope for tomorrow, as if leaving the story unfinished encouraged the future to unfold kindly. A book fully closed, with nothing placed atop it, felt like a quiet call for strength. Families never spoke these interpretations aloud, but they felt them deeply, reading meaning in the softest details. Outside, the way dust settled along pathways became a silent guide. If dust lay undisturbed, people believed no heavy boots had passed for several hours, but if small pockets of dust looked scattered, it hinted at recent movement, prompting residents to adjust their routes. Even children noticed these signs, tracing patterns on the ground with their toes, learning to move with caution without fully understanding why. In markets, quieter now than they once were, shoppers believed that the way vendors stood reflected the hidden conditions of supply. If a seller leaned against a wall with their arms crossed, people understood that goods were scarce. If they stood upright, hands lightly on their counter, it signaled that at least something could be purchased. This silent reading of body language helped avoid disappointment and unnecessary worry. People also began believing that the air carried emotional weight. Some felt that if the atmosphere felt unusually warm in the evening, it meant families were gathering with a bit of hope in their conversations. If the air felt cool and restless, they sensed that whispers of uncertainty had spread through the streets. Though intangible, these impressions shaped their decisions, gently guiding when to speak, when to listen, and when to retreat into quiet. Indoors, the glow of candlelight formed beliefs of its own. A steady flame suggested harmony inside the home, reminding people that even in difficult times, peaceful moments could still exist. But when the flame flickered unpredictably, families interpreted it as a reminder to tread lightly, to keep their voices soft and their worries manageable. These moments encouraged mindfulness long before the word existed in its modern sense. Nighttime, despite its shadows, carried its own kind of reassurance. People believed that if they ended the day by placing a hand briefly on a warm surface, a cup, a blanket, a wooden table, they could release the day's heaviness. This gentle gesture, almost instinctive, reminded them that warmth still existed, even in a world where so much felt cold. Over time, these beliefs became woven into the fabric of survival. They offered no guarantees, but they gave structure to the intangible, helping people navigate their days with a gentle rhythm that soothed the mind and steadied the heart. As the occupation pressed quietly into the background of ordinary life, people discovered comfort in interpreting even the subtlest rhythms of the world around them. They began to believe that the temperature of the morning air carried its own message. If the air felt cool but gentle, they sensed the day would unfold steadily, without abrupt changes. But if the cold felt sharp, almost metallic, they believed it signaled a day when nerves would stretch thin. These early readings became a kind of emotional weather report, delicate but reassuring, helping them prepare their hearts before stepping outside. Indoors, the way a floorboard creaked shaped quiet beliefs. A long, low creak seemed to soothe people, hinting at a familiar weight gently passing through the home. A quick, sudden crackle, however, made individuals pause, feeling as though the sound carried a warning from the structure itself. Over time, residents learned to interpret even these small noises as cues for pacing their actions, finding calm in recognizing patterns where logic offered none. Many believed that the arrangement of morning clouds gave insight into the mood of the day. Thin wisps drifting slowly across the sky felt like a promise of peaceful hours ahead, while heavy, layered clouds created a sense of quiet apprehension. Though they knew the weather wasn't truly tied to human affairs, people welcomed these interpretations as comforting companions, gentle stories whispered by the sky. In shared spaces, the way people greeted one another became another guide. A soft, brief nod indicated that the day seemed steady so far. A longer, lingering nod meant the neighbour carried something heavier, something unspoken, and needed empathy more than questions. These exchanges, silent yet expressive, helped maintain a sense of community in a time when words felt fragile. Outside, the movement of laundry in the wind became part of the collective belief system. If clothes swayed lightly on their lines, residents felt the neighbourhood carried a relaxed rhythm. If the fabric snapped sharply with sudden gusts, they prepared themselves for tension, convinced the world outside had shifted in tone. This gentle observation of everyday tasks brought a rare sense of control. People also believed that footsteps on staircases held emotional truth. Soft, unhurried steps meant someone was returning home with a calm heart. Quick, heavy footsteps reflected worry or urgency. Listening to these movements became a way of caring for one another without intruding, allowing families to understand each other's moods from the quiet language of motion. In the evenings, the glow of windows across the street created another layer of gentle interpretation. A warm, steady light suggested the household was sharing peaceful conversation. A dim, flickering glow signaled tiredness or concern. People didn't pry or speculate. They simply felt reassured or mindful, allowing these observations to shape their own approach to the night. Some believed that stirring a pot slowly brought emotional ease to the home. The circular motion felt calming, as if guiding the day toward a gentler close. Even those who didn't fully believe the idea found comfort in the ritual, letting the repetition ease their thoughts. Nighttime itself inspired a belief in stillness. People felt that if they spoke softly before sleep, just a few kind words or a hopeful wish, the atmosphere in their homes softened along with their voices. These closing moments acted as a quiet bridge from the heavy hours of the day to the gentler realm of dreams. In these small, tender beliefs, people found the strength to move through each day, shaping meaning from the softest details and discovering the quiet resilience that helped them endure. As the occupation settled into a slow and steady rhythm, people found themselves drawing meaning from movements so small they might have once gone unnoticed. Many began believing that the sound of doors closing throughout the neighborhood revealed the emotional tone of the day. A soft, measured closing suggested that residents were trying to preserve calm, but a quick, firm shut hinted that someone carried tension or worry. These subtle cues guided how others moved through the streets, prompting them to walk a bit slower or offer a gentler glance when passing by. Even the way sunlight touched window frames shaped quiet beliefs. When the morning light arrived in smooth, uninterrupted bands, people felt that the world outside would behave predictably. If the light flickered between passing clouds, however, they interpreted it as a sign of a day full of small, shifting uncertainties. Though they knew the sky didn't control human events, reading it this way brought a sense of order to their mornings. Indoors, people believed that the rhythm of sweeping floors carried emotional weight. A slow, steady sweep suggested a family trying to stay grounded. A hurried, uneven motion hinted at restlessness inside the home. Neighbours, hearing these sounds through thin walls, adapted their own pace accordingly, as if matching their movements could create a kind of quiet harmony. In narrow alleyways, the presence of a single piece of paper drifting across the ground became its own quiet omen. If the wind moved it gently, people believed the streets would remain calm. If it skittered quickly and unpredictably, they sensed that attention was needed, that the day might require more awareness. These interpretations weren't dramatic. They simply offered a way to understand the environment without speaking aloud. The sound of water dripping into metal basins formed another layer of belief. Rhythmic drips felt reassuring, as though the world still held structure. But irregular patterns made people pause, their minds instinctively searching for meaning in the smallest disruptions. This became part of an unspoken language shared by households across the town. Outside, residents believed that the position of bicycles leaned against buildings carried hints about the day's atmosphere. A bicycle resting neatly suggested its owner felt no reason to rush. One left slightly crooked meant the rider had returned with something on their mind. These small interpretations helped people feel connected, creating a quiet map of emotions across the streets. Children, too, shaped their own gentle beliefs. They thought that if they traced shapes in the dust with their shoes and the shapes remained clear, it meant the day would stay peaceful. If the lines broke apart quickly, they believed they should stay close to home. Adults didn't correct them. In a world full of uncertainty, these small rituals offered comfort. At home in the evenings, people believed that the way steam rose from a pot of soup reflected the mood inside the household. If the steam drifted upward in a calm, steady line, it felt like a quiet sign of unity. If it swirled and twisted, families interpreted it as a hint to speak softly and avoid heavy conversations. These beliefs didn't change reality, but they softened its edges. By nightfall, residents often sat by dim candles, believing that a moment of stillness at the end of the day kept their minds steady. Even in silence, they felt connected to one another through these shared, gentle interpretations, small anchors that helped them navigate the occupation with quiet resilience. As the occupation continued, people slowly began shaping beliefs around the way time flowed through their days, noticing subtle patterns that helped them feel grounded. Many believed that the calmest part of the morning wasn't tied to the sun or the weather, but to the moment when the first person in the neighborhood opened their shutters. If the shutters opened smoothly, with no hesitation, residents felt the day would unfold without sudden disruptions. But if the shutters creaked loudly or paused halfway, it seemed to signal a heaviness in the air, a reminder to move through the morning with care. Even the way footsteps echoed along stone paths formed its own quiet system of meaning. A slow, dragging step suggested someone deep in thought, perhaps carrying a private worry. A lighter, quicker rhythm made people feel unexpectedly hopeful, as though someone in town had found a slim thread of optimism. These interpretations weren't meant to predict anything. They simply offered emotional texture, something to lean on when days felt featureless. Indoors, families developed beliefs around the warmth of their rooms. If the air felt even slightly warmer than usual, they believed it meant conversations would remain gentle. If the rooms felt cool despite a closed window, they sensed that tension might rise unexpectedly. People moved through their homes with awareness, adjusting blankets, shifting lamps, creating small comforts where they could. In marketplaces, the way cloth hung on stalls informed quiet assumptions. Fabrics that lifted softly in the breeze suggested a momentary ease in the town, while unmoving cloth, heavy and still, left some feeling that uncertainty pressed more firmly upon the day. Vendors themselves, though cautious, respected these beliefs, understanding that small signs meant much to people who had so few to depend on. Residents also believed that the shape of shadows carried emotional significance. A long, narrow shadow stretching across a doorway felt welcoming, as if inviting someone to pause and breathe. A wide, uneven shadow made people instinctively step back, sensing disarray. These observations became part of their daily rhythm, guiding their choices without requiring words. Children formed their own interpretations too. They believed that if pigeons landed close together on a rooftop, the town would remain peaceful. If the birds scattered quickly, they felt it meant whispers or sharp voices might fill the day. Adults didn't challenge these beliefs. In their simplicity, they offered comfort. As evening arrived, the sound of utensils being washed shaped gentle assumptions about the night. If the clinking of dishes sounded rhythmic, people believed families were ending their days with steadiness. If the sounds were sparse or irregular, it hinted at tiredness carried silently across dinner tables. By nightfall, the town settled into a stillness that people had learned to read with care. They believed that taking one slow breath at the door before extinguishing the last light helped them release the weight of the day. It was a small gesture, but it made the darkness feel softer. And so, through these quiet beliefs, shaped from sounds, shadows, warmth, and familiar gestures, people continued navigating the occupation with gentle resilience, finding meaning where certainty could no longer be found. As the occupation lingered, people continued finding meaning in the smallest elements of everyday life, shaping quiet beliefs that offered comfort when nothing else felt predictable. Many began trusting the stillness of early afternoon as a subtle indicator of emotional balance within the town. If the streets grew unusually calm and even the usual distant chatter faded, residents believed the day was gently unfolding. But if the silence felt tense rather than peaceful, they sensed that something unsettled stirred beneath the surface. These distinctions, soft and intuitive, helped them pace their thoughts with care. Indoors, the sound of chairs being moved became another quiet language. A chair dragged slowly across the floor suggested thoughtfulness or shared reflection within a home, while quick, sharp movements hinted at unease. People living in close quarters heard these signals through thin walls and adapted their own moods accordingly, as if participating in a silent conversation that kept emotional harmony alive. Some believed that the way light touched everyday objects held significance. When sunlight warmed a cup left on a table, it felt like an invitation to pause, breathe, and appreciate a gentle moment. If clouds shifted quickly and shadows danced across surfaces, residents interpreted it as a reminder to stay mindful, aware that the day could change its tone unexpectedly. Outdoors, the rustling of leaves served as a quiet guide. If leaves moved softly in the wind, people took it as a sign of a calm evening ahead. But when the branches swayed with sudden bursts of movement, they felt reminded of the unpredictability surrounding their lives. These beliefs, though subtle, gave shape to the intangible atmosphere of the occupation. In small yards and gardens, people believed that tending to even a single plant helped restore emotional balance. Watching a leaf unfurl or feeling soil press softly against their fingers created a sense of continuity, as if growth still found a way even in difficult times. This quiet routine became a grounding ritual for many. Children, keen observers of their own world, believed that the pattern of skipping stones could predict how peaceful the evening would be. A stone that glided smoothly across water meant the night would remain gentle. One that sank quickly suggested a need for caution. Adults let these beliefs flourish, recognizing that children too needed ways to navigate uncertainty. At dusk, the sound of softly closing windows shaped another layer of meaning. A gentle click of a latch felt reassuring, signaling that families were settling into the safety of their homes. A hurried closing, however, made neighbours glance toward the street, sensing a ripple of worry. Without speaking, people understood these collective signals, adjusting their own routines to maintain calm. As night deepened, individuals believed that the final act before sleep, straightening a blanket, aligning a pair of shoes, or smoothing a pillow, helped seal the day gently, allowing their minds to release tension. These small rituals offered a feeling of control in a world where larger decisions were often out of reach. And so, through these quiet interpretations, shaped from light, sound, nature, and routine, people moved through occupation with a steady resilience, finding connection and meaning in the smallest, most familiar details surrounding them. As the occupation continued shaping every corner of daily existence, people found themselves creating gentle beliefs around the behaviour of ordinary spaces, noticing how rooms, streets, and courtyards carried moods of their own. Many believed that the air inside a room held emotional hints. If the air felt still and warm, they sensed a quiet harmony among those who lived there. But if a faint draught slipped through even a closed window, people took it as a sign that worry or tension lingered nearby. These impressions, though subtle, helped them understand the emotional landscape without needing to speak openly. Residents also began forming quiet beliefs around the sound of fabric. When someone folded laundry with slow, careful movements, it suggested they were at ease for the moment. Rapid or uneven folding hinted that their thoughts were elsewhere, weighed down by the day's events. Neighbours, hearing these faint movements through shared walls, responded with soft steps or gentle voices, maintaining a fragile balance. Outside, the way dust settled on windowsills became another sign. If a thin, smooth layer collected evenly, people felt that the street had remained calm for several hours. But if the dust was disturbed or gathered in uneven patches, they believed recent footsteps or hurried movements had passed by. This simple reading of stillness helped residents decide when to step out and when to wait a little longer. The creaking of old wooden gates carried meaning too. A slow, steady creak felt harmless, signalling someone returning home from a mundane task. But a sudden, sharp sound made families pause, listening closely for additional clues. These tiny acoustic details formed a quiet system of understanding that stretched across entire neighbourhoods. In gardens, the way plants responded to wind offered comfort. If leaves quivered gently, people believed the day held a peaceful rhythm. If branches shook abruptly, they sensed a shift in the atmosphere. Tending even a small plant became a grounding ritual, a reminder that growth continued despite everything. Children added their own interpretations to this landscape of subtle beliefs. They thought that if their chalk drawings on the pavement remained untouched until evening, the day had been protected by a kind of invisible calm. But if the drawings smudged or faded early, they whispered that the world outside had felt too awake. Adults quietly cherished these interpretations, knowing they gave children a way to process uncertainty. Indoors at dusk, people believed the sound of a kettle finishing its boil reflected the home's emotional state. A soft, gentle whistle felt reassuring, while a shrill, strained pitch made listeners momentarily still, as though the kettle itself had sensed tension. These small moments shaped the rhythm of evenings, encouraging families to move gently. When night finally settled, residents often paused before lighting a single candle or lamp, believing that taking one slow breath in the darkness helped clear the remnants of the day. This pause, quiet and consistent, became a ritual shared across homes, a collective moment of stillness in a world that rarely offered any. Through these delicate beliefs, shaped from movement, sound, and the quiet behaviours of ordinary spaces, people continued navigating the occupation with soft resilience, finding meaning in the details that asked for nothing but attention. As the occupation carried on, people found themselves interpreting even the smallest interactions between objects as gentle indicators of the day's emotional weight. Many began believing that the way a door handle felt to the touch revealed the atmosphere beyond it. If the metal felt warm, they sensed that the home behind it was filled with quiet activity and steady emotion. But if it felt cold, even when the room wasn't particularly chilly, they took it as a sign that the household had been holding its breath, moving through the day with caution. This habit wasn't practical in any direct way, yet it helped people prepare themselves before stepping inside. The sound of footsteps on staircases, always familiar, gained new layers of meaning. A slow, rhythmic ascent suggested thoughtfulness, a person returning from a moment of calm outside. Quick, light steps felt like relief, as if someone had heard a kind word or seen a friendly face. Heavy, uneven steps made listeners pause, sensing that a worry had followed the person home. These interpretations allowed neighbours to understand one another without speaking, creating a silent network of empathy. Outdoors, the way small stones shifted beneath someone's shoes shaped quiet beliefs. If pebbles scattered softly, residents felt the person walking was steady in spirit. But if the stones skittered sharply, bouncing across the path, they sensed a rush or an inner disturbance. These tiny cues helped people decide when to approach someone gently or when to give them space. In shared courtyards, people believed that the direction of drifting smoke from small cooking fires offered subtle guidance. Smoke rising straight upward felt like a momentary alignment of peace. Smoke blown low and sideways hinted that the mood of the day might tilt in unpredictable directions. These observations didn't predict events, but they gave residents a way to feel connected to their surroundings. Inside homes, the way pages of a book behaved influenced soft interpretations. If a page turned easily with a faint whisper of movement, families believed the reader's mind was at ease. If the pages stuck together or fluttered too quickly, they took it as a sign that concentration was difficult, that the weight of the day rested heavily on someone's thoughts. These impressions guided conversations in gentle, unspoken ways. Children shaped their own beliefs around shadows cast on walls at dusk. They thought that if the shadows appeared long and smooth, the night would be calm. If the shapes flickered or shifted quickly, they whispered that the world outside was restless. Adults allowed these ideas to blossom, recognizing that children needed ways to understand the atmosphere just as the adults did. In kitchens, residents believed that the way spoons clinked inside cups revealed subtle moods. A soft, rhythmic clink felt like harmony within the home. A louder, quicker sound carried hints of impatience or stress. These tiny acoustic details became another thread in the tapestry of unspoken communication. By the time night fully settled, people believed that sitting quietly for a moment before blowing out a candle helped ease their minds. In that small pause, they acknowledged the day, everything that had been endured, everything that had quietly passed. These moments didn't erase the hardships, but they softened them, creating a sense of internal steadiness. Through these gentle practices, shaped from sounds, textures, and the movement of ordinary things, people discovered ways to feel anchored, even when the outside world felt endlessly uncertain. As the occupation stretched quietly through the seasons, people found themselves forming soft beliefs around the subtle rhythms of shared spaces, hallways, stairwells, and doorways that connected homes like gentle threads. Many believed that the way echoes behaved in these spaces revealed the emotional tone of the building. If footsteps echoed softly, blending into the air, residents felt a sense of calm drifting through the walls. But if the echoes bounced sharply, almost hurried, they sensed that worry or tension had slipped into someone's day. These impressions guided how they moved, encouraging slower steps or softer voices to restore balance. Indoors, people developed quiet beliefs around the placement of everyday objects. A pair of shoes left neatly by the door felt like a sign of emotional steadiness within the home. Shoes placed slightly askew suggested that someone had returned with thoughts still tangled, needing time to settle. Family members noticed these small clues without mentioning them, adjusting their tone and pace to match the unspoken atmosphere. In small kitchens, the rhythm of chopping vegetables held significance. A steady, even rhythm suggested calm concentration, while quick or uneven chopping hinted at a restless mind. These sounds, carrying gently through thin walls, created an invisible conversation between households, a way to understand each other's moods without crossing any boundaries. Outside, the behaviour of loose shutters on older buildings formed another layer of belief. If shutters tapped lightly against the frame in the wind, people felt the day had grown gentle, almost familiar. But if they rattled sharply, even for a moment, residents paused, sensing that something unsettled, whether weather or emotion, had shifted. This simple interpretation brought meaning to sounds that might otherwise have blended into the background. In shared courtyards, the way laundry lines moved shaped quiet assumptions. Lines that swayed slowly suggested that residents had passed the morning in soft routines, unhurried. But lines that twitched or jerked in the wind made people glance upward, as though expecting a change in the day's tone. These soft readings helped create a sense of collective awareness. Children formed their own gentle rituals, believing that if a small stone rolled smoothly down a slope, the afternoon would pass peacefully. If the stone wobbled or stopped abruptly, they whispered that the world felt uncertain. Adults watched these small rituals with understanding, knowing they offered young minds a sense of connection in an unpredictable time. Indoors, the flicker of lamplight influenced quiet beliefs. A lamp glowing steadily made families feel anchored, as if the home itself had taken a calming breath. A flickering wick encouraged people to move gently, lower their voices, or light another lamp to soften the atmosphere. These actions weren't based on fear. They were ways to care for the delicate emotional balance shared by everyone under the same roof. As evening settled, the way someone closed a book held subtle meaning. A slow, mindful closing felt like an expression of closure, a readiness to let the day drift away. A quicker shut suggested lingering thoughts that needed time to unravel. People learned to sense these things from one another, responding with quiet presence rather than questions. By night, residents believed that touching their hand to the wall for a brief moment, feeling the cool, solid surface, helped steady their minds before sleep. It was a simple gesture, almost instinctive, but it offered a sense of grounding in a world that felt constantly shifted by forces beyond their control. And so, through these small, delicate beliefs shaped by echoes, objects, and the gentle behaviour of everyday spaces, people continued navigating the occupation with quiet resilience, finding comfort in the subtle details that made the days feel more understandable. As the occupation deepened into a steady, muted backdrop of everyday routines, people discovered even more meaning hidden within the smallest movements of life around them. Many began believing that the way a room's shadows settled in the late afternoon revealed the emotional balance of the home. If shadows stretched softly across the floor, blending calmly into corners, residents felt the household was steady. But if the shadows appeared sharp or shifted quickly with passing clouds, they sensed a restlessness in the air, a subtle reminder to approach the evening gently. These interpretations helped people maintain a fragile sense of awareness without speaking a word. Indoors, the sound of drawers opening and closing carried quiet significance. A drawer closing with a soft thud suggested someone organising their thoughts, trying to find clarity. A drawer shut too quickly or left slightly ajar hinted that their mind felt unsettled, moving faster than their hands. Families learned to read these cues naturally, responding with patience or offering silent support when needed. Outside, people developed beliefs around the behaviour of distant rooftops. If smoke rose straight upward from chimneys, forming clean lines against the sky, they felt the neighbourhood was united in its calm. But if the smoke curved or twisted abruptly, they sensed that households were carrying heavier emotions. Residents didn't mention these observations, yet everyone seemed quietly attuned to them. In narrow alleyways, the sound of a single bouncing object, a pebble, a nut, a falling acorn, held gentle meaning. A soft, rolling bounce felt harmless, almost comforting. A fast, sharp clatter made people pause and listen, believing the day had shifted slightly, even if nothing visible had changed. These tiny responses anchored them to their surroundings. In living rooms, the way blankets were folded shaped silent interpretations. A neatly folded blanket at the end of a couch suggested that someone had taken time to settle themselves. A blanket left loosely draped or slightly wrinkled hinted at lingering thoughts, as if the person had been too preoccupied to finish the gesture. These small details helped families understand one another quietly, without intruding. Children created their own soft beliefs from the world around them. They thought that if the patterns on a rug looked the same as they did the day before, the evening would feel peaceful. But if the patterns seemed shifted or unfamiliar in the dim light, they whispered that the mood of the home had changed. Adults never corrected these ideas. They recognized how gently children tried to read the world. Outdoors, the rustling of drying laundry formed its own kind of rhythm. Fabric moving slowly in the breeze felt like a sign that the day would settle into calm. If clothes snapped sharply on their lines, people felt reminded to stay alert, even if only in spirit. These small interpretations gave meaning to ordinary motions, turning them into guides for navigating uncertainty. As dusk approached, the sound of someone stirring a pot or setting dishes onto a table shaped quiet assumptions. A steady rhythm suggested a home preparing for a peaceful evening. A scattered or rushed movement meant the cook's thoughts were elsewhere. Neighbours heard these rhythms through thin walls, responding with gentle quietness of their own. When night finally fell, people believed that placing one hand briefly on a windowsill before closing the curtains helped soften the transition into darkness. This gesture, simple and unnoticed, made them feel connected to the outside world just long enough to release the day. Through these small, tender beliefs, shaped from shadows, movements, and everyday sounds, people continued finding a way to live with quiet strength, navigating the occupation through details that brought them closer to themselves and to one another. As the occupation settled further into people's lives, a quiet sensitivity to the tiniest details continued to shape their beliefs about each passing day. Many began trusting the way morning air moved through open windows as a soft indicator of the day's emotional temperature. If the air drifted in gently, carrying a faint sense of warmth, residents believed the day would bring manageable moments. But if the breeze arrived in brief, uneven bursts, they sensed hidden tension beneath the surface, prompting them to move more thoughtfully. This simple observation helped people feel prepared before even stepping outside their doors. Indoors, the sound of someone adjusting a simple object, a bowl, a picture frame, a small vase, carried meaning. If the object was set down with quiet care, it suggested a calm mindset. But if it clicked sharply against a surface, others sensed a moment of inner restlessness. These interpretations weren't judgments. They were ways of understanding one another with gentleness, relying on sound instead of questions. Outdoors, the way pathways looked at different times of day informed people's soft intuitions. If dust lay evenly across a walkway, untouched by hurried feet, residents believed that the morning had passed without tension. But if footprints appeared uneven or scattered, they sensed that people had moved through the area with worry or haste. This quiet noticing helped them decide whether to linger or keep their steps light. In shared courtyards, people believed that the way birds perched on fences revealed the tone of the afternoon. If the birds sat close together, pecking calmly at the ground, it felt like an assurance of peace. But if they fluttered suddenly or took flight without clear reason, residents sensed a shift, as if the air itself had become unsettled. These delicate signs became a comforting language of their own. Children developed their own interpretations of safety and calm. They believed that if their small toys stayed upright where they had left them, blocks, wooden figures, spinning tops, the day would remain gentle. But if a toy toppled unexpectedly, even from a small vibration, they whispered that the house felt too awake and moved with extra care. Adults treated these childhood readings with respect, recognizing their quiet wisdom. Inside kitchens, the rhythm of someone wiping a table or drying a dish held emotional signals. Slow, circular motions suggested the person was processing the day peacefully. Faster, more uneven motions hinted at lingering worries. These subtle observations helped family members understand each other's needs without asking direct questions, allowing comfort to flow naturally. As evening approached, the behavior of indoor light shaped beliefs. If the glow of a lamp spread softly across the room, residents felt the night would settle easily. If the light flickered or created sharper contrasts on the walls, they took it as a gentle reminder to move quietly, preserving the fragile calm. By nightfall, people often paused at their doorways before stepping into darker rooms, believing that 3 slow breaths helped create a small barrier between the weight of the day and the quiet of the night. This simple ritual offered a sense of closure, allowing them to carry only softness into their sleep. And so, through these small, delicate beliefs, formed from breezes, sounds, light and movement, people found a steady way to navigate life under occupation, crafting meaning from the faintest details that gently held their world together. As the occupation stretched deeper into the rhythms of daily life, people grew increasingly attentive to quiet signals in their surroundings, creating gentle beliefs that helped them navigate the slow, uncertain hours. Many began noticing the way sound travelled through hallways at different times of day. If voices drifted softly from behind closed doors, blending into a calm murmur, residents believed the building was holding steady. But if the sounds felt scattered, quick footsteps, sudden shifts, doors opening too abruptly, they sensed that tension lingered somewhere nearby. These subtle cues became an unspoken guide, shaping how people moved and spoke within shared spaces. Indoors, the way small objects rested on shelves carried significance. A cup placed perfectly centered felt like a sign of deliberate, peaceful action. A cup slightly off to one side hinted that someone's thoughts had been elsewhere while setting it down. Without discussing it, families used these soft interpretations to adjust their tone or offer quiet reassurance. In courtyards, the way sunlight reflected off windows influenced beliefs about the day's emotional current. When reflections appeared warm and steady, people felt comforted, as though the world had paused long enough to breathe. But if the reflection shifted quickly, catching the light in sharp fragments, residents took it as a reminder that the atmosphere outside was unpredictable. These small observations offered structure to an otherwise ambiguous world. Children developed their own quiet rituals, believing that if they placed stones in a perfect line and the stones remained undisturbed until lunchtime, the day held a protective calm. But if the stones shifted or fell, they whispered that something had changed, even if no one else could see it. Their beliefs, formed from innocence and intuition, became woven into the fabric of family routines. Outside on the streets, people paid close attention to the sound of carts moving over cobblestone. A cart rolling smoothly suggested that its owner felt unhurried, carrying out tasks with ease. A cart rattling quickly, wheels catching against the uneven stones, revealed urgency. Residents listened carefully, letting these sounds shape the pace of their own steps. Indoors, the movement of curtains became a quiet barometer of mood. A soft sway in the breeze felt comforting, reminding residents that the world outside continued its gentle motions. But if the curtains fluttered erratically, snapping lightly at their edges, people sensed that change was in the air, prompting them to approach the evening with extra care. In kitchens, the pattern of footsteps mattered. If someone walked evenly from stove to table and back again, it meant their thoughts were steady. But if their steps paused unexpectedly or drifted off course, others noticed, responding with softer voices or slower movements, as though offering silent support. As dusk settled, people believed the way dust particles floated in the fading light revealed the emotional tone of the night. Dust moving slowly in golden strands suggested peace, but dust swirling too quickly hinted at restlessness, encouraging residents to wind down with more intention. Before sleep, many developed a ritual of touching the edge of their blanket carefully, smoothing its surface in one gentle motion. They believed this act helped transition their minds from the scattered worries of the day to the quiet of the night. Through these delicate beliefs, shaped from sounds, reflections, motions, and the behaviour of small objects, people continued guiding themselves with quiet resilience, finding meaning in details so subtle that only those longing for calm could truly feel them. As the occupation continued shaping daily routines, people grew even more attuned to gentle, almost imperceptible signs in their environment, forming soft beliefs that brought a sense of steadiness to uncertain days. Many began trusting the way objects responded to touch. If a chair felt slightly warm when someone sat down, they believed the room held comforting energy. But if the wood felt unexpectedly cool, even in the afternoon, it suggested that worries had lingered there earlier. These impressions weren't logical, but they helped people feel connected to the emotional rhythms around them. Indoors, the way spoons clinked against bowls carried subtle meaning. A slow, measured clink suggested someone was eating thoughtfully, grounded in the moment. A quicker or sharper sound hinted that their mind was elsewhere, moving through concerns too heavy to speak aloud. Families learned to read these cues instinctively, adjusting conversations to be either lighter or quieter. Outside, people paid close attention to the behaviour of small plants growing between stones in the street. If the leaves lifted gently, as though catching the smallest breeze, residents believed the day would unfold smoothly. If the leaves lay flat or barely moved, it felt like a sign that the air held tension. These tiny interpretations offered comfort in a world where few things remained under their control. In stairwells, the way a railing felt beneath one's hand created its own set of beliefs. A smooth, steady slide of the hand along the wood made the building feel calm. But if the railing felt slightly rough, or seemed to vibrate faintly as someone walked downstairs, people interpreted it as a sign that emotions in the building were unsettled. These impressions, though subtle, helped them move mindfully. Children shaped their own quiet markers of safety. They believed that if chalk lines they drew remained unbroken throughout the morning, the day held gentle energy. But if the lines smudged or cracked early, they whispered that the world outside was tilted, prompting them to stay closer to home. Adults understood these rituals, recognizing that children found their own ways to read the atmosphere. In kitchens, the sound of water being poured held delicate significance. A smooth, uninterrupted flow suggested clarity and calmness within the home. If the water sputtered or splashed, people took it as an indication that unease had found its way into their routines. These observations helped shape the tone of mealtimes and conversations. In courtyards, the way sunlight touched the ground influenced beliefs as well. If patches of light appeared soft and round, residents felt the afternoon would remain gentle. But sharper beams casting angular patterns made them a bit more cautious, as if the brightness itself warned of sudden changes. These interpretations brought subtle structure to each passing hour. Indoors at dusk, the way the last bit of light flickered across a wall before fading became another guide. A slow, even dimming felt like a peaceful transition into evening. A quick disappearance of light suggested the day had held unspoken tension. Families adjusted their tone and pace in response, seeking harmony where they could. Before sleep, many believed that gently smoothing the corners of their pillow helped ease lingering worries. This small gesture, soft and unhurried, marked the end of the day and created a small pocket of calm. Through these quiet beliefs, drawn from touch, sound, light, and the behaviour of simple objects, people moved through the occupation with steady resilience, finding clarity in details that required no words, only attention. As the occupation lingered into yet another season, people found themselves creating even more delicate beliefs drawn from the subtle behaviours of their surroundings. Many began paying attention to how door hinges sounded at different moments of the day. A hinge that opened with a long, smooth sigh felt like a sign that the household behind it was calm and steady. But a hinge that gave a quick, sharp squeak suggested that someone inside had moved suddenly, distracted or unsettled. These small sounds shaped how neighbours approached conversations, prompting them to tread gently through the shared quiet. Indoors, the way fabric behaved carried its own quiet meanings. If a curtain fell softly back into place after someone brushed past it, the moment felt peaceful, as though the home breathed in harmony. But if the fabric swayed for too long, or fluttered without clear reason, people interpreted it as a hint that the air held a thread of tension. These interpretations helped them adjust their tone and movements, protecting the fragile balance of the evening. Outside, the pattern of scattered leaves on a pathway influenced soft beliefs. Leaves arranged naturally in a gentle spread made residents feel that the morning had passed calmly. But leaves gathered into uneven clusters, disturbed by hurried feet or sudden gusts, made them believe the atmosphere had been unsettled earlier. These quiet readings of the landscape helped shape expectations for the rest of the day. Children once again found their own signs in the world around them. They believed that if their shadows stretched evenly behind them while they walked, the day was safe. But if the shadows wavered or danced oddly across the stones, they whispered that the world felt tilted, encouraging them to stay close to familiar places. Adults listened, not because the shadows held actual meaning, but because the children's instinct for reading the mood was often surprisingly accurate. In kitchens, the sound of lids being placed on pots became another gentle indicator. A lid that settled with a soft click suggested a peaceful rhythm inside the home. A lid that clattered even slightly hinted at distraction or worry. These tiny details offered a window into the emotional space of the household, encouraging family members to respond with patience. In shared hallways, people formed beliefs around the way drafts moved. A steady, cool breeze passing through felt refreshing, like a sign of openness among neighbours. But if the air shifted abruptly, swirling unpredictably, people sensed that emotions were stirring somewhere nearby. These impressions, though subtle, shaped the way they carried themselves through the building. Outdoors, the sound of distant birds influenced the town's emotional pace. Birds calling softly from rooftops made residents feel reassured, as if the world was offering a small reminder of normalcy. But sudden silence in the sky made them pause, sensing that the day held a sharper edge beneath its surface. As evening settled, the way someone placed a book on a table carried significance. A gentle placement felt like closure and acceptance of the day's events. A quicker movement suggested unresolved thoughts, prompting others to speak softly or bring a small comfort. Before sleep, many believed that taking a moment to sit in stillness, without moving, without thinking too deeply, helped separate the quiet of night from the noise of the day. It was a ritual of transition, a way to protect whatever calm they had found. Through these subtle, tender beliefs, rooted in sound, movement, touch, and the simple behaviour of ordinary things, people continued navigating the occupation with resilience shaped not by certainty, but by the gentle rhythms they chose to understand. As the occupation continued weaving itself quietly into everyday life, people found new layers of meaning in the smallest motions around them, creating gentle beliefs that helped them feel anchored. Many began noticing how the weight of a door felt when they pushed it open. If the door moved easily, gliding without resistance, they believed the day carried a kind of softness. But if the door felt heavy, as though the air behind it pressed back. They sensed that the household had experienced a moment of unease. This subtle feeling guided their first steps inside, shaping whether they spoke or simply offered a silent presence. Indoors, the placement of light across familiar objects became another quiet guide. When a beam of sunlight settled evenly across a table, residents felt the home held balance. But if the light moved quickly across the surface, shaped by shifting clouds, they took it as a hint that emotions might be unsettled. These interpretations were never discussed. They simply influenced how people approached each other throughout the day. Outside, the behaviour of small puddles after rain shaped gentle assumptions. If the water remained still, smooth as glass, residents believed the town was experiencing a rare moment of shared calm. But if ripples formed without clear cause, stirred by distant footsteps or a sudden breeze, they sensed that the streets held a quiet restlessness. These impressions encouraged them to move slowly, as though respecting the delicate atmosphere. Children found significance in the way stones bounced when thrown lightly across the ground. If the stone skipped smoothly, they whispered that the day held kindness. If it bounced awkwardly or stopped abruptly, they believed the world was feeling uncertain. Adults let these simple ideas flourish, understanding how much children relied on small rituals to make sense of their surroundings. In kitchens, the way steam rose from a pot became its own emotional marker. A thin, steady ribbon of steam felt calming, like a quiet promise of normalcy. But steam that curled sharply or twisted unpredictably suggested that someone in the home carried unspoken worry. These signs helped family members read one another with empathy. In stairwells, the sound of someone descending a flight of steps was listened to with quiet attention. Soft, measured steps felt reassuring, as though the person moved through their thoughts with clarity. But uneven footsteps, pauses mid-step, or a sudden quickening hinted that the person was weighed down by something internal. Neighbours didn't react openly. They simply adjusted their own pace, contributing to a sense of unspoken support. Outdoors, people developed beliefs around the way shadows stretched across walls in the late afternoon. A long, smooth shadow made the world feel gentle, as if the day was easing itself toward evening. But jagged or fragmented shadows reminded residents to tread carefully, both with their movements and their words. As dusk approached, the sound of someone sweeping their doorway held meaning. A slow, steady sweep suggested a desire for calm. A faster, more forceful rhythm hinted that the person sought distraction from their thoughts. These interpretations helped maintain a shared emotional awareness. Before sleep, many believed that taking a moment to rest their hand on the cool surface of a wall helped separate the heaviness of the day from the soft stillness of night. This small gesture grounded them, offering a brief moment of connection to something solid and unmoving. Through these delicate beliefs, formed from light, sound, movement, and the smallest textures of daily life, people continued navigating the occupation with quiet resilience, finding steady pathways through uncertainty by paying attention to the gentlest details. As the occupation settled into yet another stretch of quiet, uncertain days, people continued forming soft beliefs from the smallest details around them, relying on these gentle interpretations to guide their emotions. Many began noticing the way sounds travelled through their homes at dawn. If the morning carried a faint, even hum, like distant voices blending with the soft creak of wood, they believed the day would unfold with a calm rhythm. But if the sounds felt sharp or scattered, bouncing awkwardly off the walls, they sensed the air held a certain restlessness. These impressions helped set the pace of the morning, shaping how they approached their first tasks. Indoors, the way someone placed their hands on the back of a chair formed quiet meaning. If the touch was light and brief, it felt like a sign of steadiness. But if fingers lingered or gripped the wood a bit too tightly, family members sensed that the person stood balancing heavier thoughts. No one asked questions. They simply adjusted their own voices and movements, creating space for the emotion to settle. Outside, people observed how shadows moved across open ground. If shadows drifted slowly, Stretching smoothly with the shifting sun, residents believed the day carried a softer tone. But if shadows darted quickly or flickered with sudden gusts of wind, they felt a subtle tension beneath the surface. These interpretations weren't precise, but they gave shape to feelings that might have otherwise gone unnoticed. Children, always creative in their perceptions, believed that if a dandelion puff stayed intact when blown gently, the afternoon would be peaceful. But if the seed scattered wildly, they whispered that the day was too awake. Adults smiled at these interpretations, understanding that children needed their own way of reading the world. In kitchens, the rhythm of a knife tapping lightly against a cutting board shaped quiet beliefs. A slow, even rhythm suggested calm concentration. A hurried, uneven tapping hinted that someone's thoughts were distracted. These small details guided how families interacted, offering silent ways to support one another. In shared courtyards, people paid attention to the way laundry moved on its lines. A gentle sway felt reassuring, signalling a comfortable silence shared among neighbours. But if the fabric twisted sharply in the wind, it suggested an unsettled atmosphere, prompting residents to keep their steps soft and their movements unhurried. Indoors at dusk, the behaviour of a candle's flame became another emotional marker. A steady flame offered comfort and a sense of grounding. A flickering flame, shifting rapidly from side to side, made families speak a little softer, acknowledging the subtle change in mood. As night approached, the sound of someone folding clothes carried meaning too. Slow folds indicated closure, a desire to end the day peacefully. Quick or uneven folds hinted at lingering thoughts that needed time to settle. Before sleep, many believed that brushing their fingers lightly across the edge of their blanket helped release the last traces of worry. This small gesture, almost unnoticed in the dim light, created a quiet moment of transition, allowing them to enter the night with a softer heart. Through these delicate beliefs, shaped from movement, sound, shadows, and touch, people continued to find gentle ways of navigating life under occupation, grounding themselves in details that offered comfort when certainty was scarce. As the occupation continued its quiet, steady grip on daily life, people grew even more sensitive to the subtle signals that shaped their beliefs about each passing hour. Many began noticing the way light behaved when it first entered their homes each morning. If the light fell in soft golden patches that stretched naturally across the floor, residents believed the day would carry a peaceful tone. But if the light appeared in scattered, shifting shapes, as if unable to settle, they sensed that emotions around them might feel similarly unsettled. These gentle interpretations offered a sense of orientation, even when the world outside felt directionless. Indoors, the sound of books being handled took on quiet meaning. A book closed slowly with a soft thump suggested the reader had found a moment of clarity or comfort. But a book shut too quickly hinted at wandering thoughts or worry. Family members noticed these cues without speaking, adjusting their behaviour to match the emotional rhythm of the room. Outside, people paid attention to how small branches moved in the wind. If branches swayed in a smooth, even motion, it felt like the air carried calm energy. But if the branches twitched or shook with sudden bursts, residents took it as a reminder that the day might bring unexpected moments. These observations didn't change anything tangible, yet they provided a quiet sense of awareness. Children formed their own beliefs based on patterns they saw in the dirt roads. If they drew a line with a stick and the line remained clear, they believed the afternoon would stay gentle. But if the line crumbled easily under the slightest breeze, they whispered that the world felt a bit shaky, choosing to play closer to home. Adults didn't question these rituals. They understood the comfort children found in them. In kitchens, the way someone stirred a pot held emotional meaning. A slow, circular motion suggested the person felt grounded. Faster stirring, with uneven pauses, hinted that their thoughts were elsewhere. These small details became signals for others to step in quietly, offering help without asking questions. In shared hallways, people believed the way coats hung on hooks reflected the mood of the building. A neatly hung coat, straight and even, felt reassuring. A coat draped loosely or hanging by a single corner hinted that someone had moved through the hallway, distracted or tired. These gentle readings helped maintain a silent understanding among neighbours. Indoors, during the evening, the way plates were placed onto tables shaped beliefs too. A soft placement signalled patience and care. A quicker movement, producing a faint clatter, suggested a mind weighed down by lingering thoughts. Families responded by softening their voices and keeping their gestures calm. As night settled, the sound of blankets being adjusted carried meaning. A smooth pull of the covers felt like acceptance of the day. A rustling, uneven adjustment hinted that someone was still trying to settle their thoughts. Before sleep, many believed that pausing for a brief moment with eyes closed, just one calm breath, helped separate the heaviness of the day from the stillness of the night. This small, steady ritual brought comfort to countless homes, offering a sense of gentleness in a world filled with quiet tension. Through these delicate beliefs, formed from movement, sound, and the behaviour of simple objects, people found ways to carry themselves through the occupation with a soft resilience, discovering meaning in the smallest signals that surrounded them. As the occupation continued shaping the quiet routine of everyday life, people found themselves noticing even smaller details, forming gentle beliefs that helped them understand the emotional landscape around them. Many began observing how footsteps sounded when someone crossed a wooden floor. If the steps were soft and evenly spaced, residents believed the person felt calm and present. But if the steps paused midway or carried a faint shuffle, they sensed that the person was deep in thought, carrying something unspoken. These quiet impressions helped families adjust their own movements, creating a sense of harmony within close quarters. Indoors, the way someone folded a simple cloth, whether a dish towel or a handkerchief, became another quiet indicator. A smooth, careful fold suggested the person felt steady, grounded in routine. A hurried or uneven fold, however, hinted at a restless mind. These subtle cues allowed others to respond with gentler gestures, offering support without needing words. Outside, people grew attentive to how fences reacted to the wind. If a fence creaked in a long, slow rhythm, it felt like a sign that the day carried a soft stillness. But if the creaks came in short, irregular bursts, residents took it as a sign that the air held a hint of tension. Such interpretations were small, almost imperceptible, but they helped people feel connected to their surroundings. Children continued creating their own systems of meaning. They believed that if a tossed pebble landed quietly without bouncing too far, the world was calm. But if it skipped unexpectedly or clattered loudly, they whispered that the day felt tilted. These simple ideas helped them understand the atmosphere in ways that felt safe and familiar. In kitchens, the pattern of water droplets falling from freshly washed dishes shaped beliefs as well. A steady drip felt comforting, like a reminder that routine still existed. But if the droplets fell unevenly, producing unpredictable sounds, residents sensed that the evening might feel emotionally scattered. Such tiny observations helped families move with greater care. In hallways, the way someone touched the walls as they walked became meaningful. A gentle brush of fingers suggested they sought comfort, grounding themselves. A firmer touch, almost a press, hinted at someone trying to steady their thoughts. Neighbours noticed these gestures quietly, offering space or soft greetings depending on what they sensed. Outdoors at dusk, the way light reflected off windows formed another layer of interpretation. A warm, steady reflection brought reassurance, signalling calm within the home. But if the reflections flickered quickly or broke into uneven shapes, residents felt that the atmosphere inside might be tense or unsettled. These small signs were ways of connecting without intruding. As night approached, people believed the sound of fabric being laid over a chair, perhaps a shawl or a blanket, carried gentle meaning. A quiet placement meant the day was ending smoothly. A faint, rushed rustle hinted that someone was still carrying their worries into the evening. Before sleep, many developed a simple ritual, resting their palm flat against the cool surface of a bedside table for a brief moment. They believed this helped release the final threads of tension, grounding them before slipping into rest. Through these delicate beliefs, shaped by footsteps, fabric, reflections, and soft movements, people continued navigating the occupation with quiet resilience, finding comfort in details that spoke softly to the heart. As the occupation continued blending into the slow rhythm of daily life, people grew even more receptive to the smallest details, forming gentle beliefs that helped them navigate the quiet uncertainty surrounding them. Many began noticing how the air felt when stepping from one room to another. If the air shifted softly, just a slight change in temperature or scent, they believed the home held a peaceful flow. But if the air felt heavier or noticeably different, they sensed that someone inside had carried unspoken emotions through that space. These impressions guided how they approached conversations, choosing silence or softness depending on what they felt. Indoors, the sound of someone placing an object onto a shelf became meaningful. A gentle placement suggested the person felt calm enough to move slowly. A more direct or hurried tap hinted at lingering worries. Families, growing accustomed to shared stillness, learned to read these sounds instinctively. Outside, people observed how patches of soil responded to the day. If the ground looked smooth, undisturbed by hurried feet, residents believed the morning had been steady and calm. But if the soil appeared uneven, marked by scattered impressions, they took it as a sign that neighbours had moved through with concern or haste. These small readings helped shape expectations for the hours ahead. Children continued creating their own interpretations. They believed that if a tossed leaf spiraled gently down to the ground, the world felt peaceful. But if the leaf dropped quickly or wobbled sharply, they whispered that the air felt restless, prompting them to stay closer to home. Their beliefs, though simple, carried a gentle truth about the atmosphere adults also sensed. In kitchens, people paid attention to the way a wooden spoon tapped against the side of a pot. A soft, rhythmic tap felt grounding, as if the person cooking was lost in a moment of calm focus. But an uneven or rapid tap suggested distraction. These subtle cues helped families move with empathy, adjusting their tone and presence. In shared spaces like stairwells, the sound of fabric brushing against walls formed another layer of meaning. A quiet, gliding brush felt harmless, almost comforting. But a louder rustle or abrupt movement suggested someone carried a restless mood. Neighbours responded with softer steps, creating a gentle equilibrium within the building. Outdoors at dusk, people observed how lamplight reflected off cobblestones. A warm, steady glow felt reassuring, as if the evening promised a peaceful transition into night. But reflections that shimmered in irregular patterns made residents pause, sensing that the night might carry a sharper edge. These impressions influenced how they approached their final tasks of the day. As bedtime neared, the way someone adjusted their pillow-shaped quiet beliefs. A slow, careful adjustment felt like acceptance of the day's end. A quicker, restless movement hinted that worries remained. Before sleep, many developed a tender ritual, tracing the edge of their blanket with their fingertips. They believed this small, soothing motion helped release tension, inviting calm into the final moments of the night. Through these delicate beliefs, rooted in air, sound, soil, and gentle gestures, people continued navigating the occupation with quiet resilience, finding meaning in the softest shifts of their world. As the occupation carried on with its quiet pressure, people continued forming gentle beliefs from the smallest sensations, using these clues to guide their inner balance through each uncertain day. Many began paying attention to how floors felt beneath their feet first thing in the morning. If the wooden boards felt slightly warm, even before the fire was lit, residents believed the home carried leftover calm from the night. But if the floor felt unusually cool, they sensed that someone had gone to bed with a heavy mind. This soft awareness shaped the way they moved through the first quiet minutes of the day. Indoors, the sound of someone opening a drawer became another subtle indicator. A slow, steady pull suggested thoughtfulness and patience, while a quicker tug meant the person was moving through their routine with distracted energy. Families noticed these differences without speaking, adjusting the mood of the room to support whoever seemed unsettled. Outside, people watched how small bits of paper or leaves travelled across the street. If they drifted along lazily, guided by a gentle breeze, residents believed the day held a peaceful tone. But if they skittered sharply across the stones, they sensed tension in the air, as though the street itself was whispering caution. These quiet readings helped them decide when to step outside or linger indoors a little longer. Children found meaning in the way puddles formed after a light rain. If a puddle held a clear reflection, they believed the day would be gentle. But if ripples disrupted the image, they whispered that something unseen might shift in the afternoon. Adults never dismissed these ideas. They understood how closely children listen to the world. In kitchens, the sound of jars being opened carried its own emotional message. A jar opened smoothly suggested ease. One opened with effort, accompanied by a faint scrape, hinted that the person's thoughts were tangled. These small signals helped family members respond with quiet care. In shared hallways, people noticed how footsteps echoed. Soft, even echoes felt reassuring, while echoes that bounced unevenly made residents pause, sensing the rhythm of the building had shifted slightly. Outdoors at dusk, the way lamp shadows stretched across walls influenced beliefs too. A slow, expanding shadow felt calming, like a gentle invitation to wind down. But a sharp, quickly changing shadow suggested the night carried a nervous edge. Before sleep, many leaned into a simple ritual, smoothing the edge of their bedsheet with the back of their hand. They believed this gesture helped release the last remains of tension, giving the mind permission to settle. Through these delicate interpretations, shaped from sound, movement, and the faintest shifts in their surroundings, people continued finding ways to navigate the occupation with quiet resilience, holding on to small signs of steadiness wherever they appeared. As the occupation slipped deeper into the background of daily life, people continued drawing comfort from the tiniest details around them, forming gentle beliefs that helped them understand the emotional currents of each day. Many began noticing how chairs sounded when someone pulled them from a table. A quiet, steady scrape suggested the person was moving calmly, grounded in their thoughts. But a sharper or quicker scrape hinted at restlessness, a mind pulled in several directions at once. These small sounds offered silent clues that shaped how families approached one another. Indoors, the way a clock ticked became meaningful. If the ticking felt even and soft, blending naturally into the room, residents believed the day held a steady rhythm. But if the ticking seemed louder than usual, as though pushing into the silence, they sensed that underlying worry filled the space. People listened without trying, letting the sound guide their pace through the morning. Outside, people watched how laundry clips held fabric on the lines. If the clip stayed firm despite light wind, they believed the day would remain stable. But if the fabric slipped or twisted unexpectedly, they took it as a sign that the afternoon might bring small emotional shifts. These observations weren't dramatic, they were gentle tools for staying aware. Children continued shaping their own beliefs, watching how chalk dust scattered when they drew on stone pathways. If the dust settled softly, they felt reassured. But if it shot out in uneven bursts, they whispered that something in the air felt jumpy. Adults quietly admired their ability to read subtle signs. In kitchens, the way a pot lid rattled while boiling water shaped assumptions too. A soft, rhythmic rattle felt comforting, suggesting normalcy. A quicker, uneven rattle hinted that tensions lingered. Families adjusted their tone in response, creating small pockets of calm. In stairwells, the sound of someone brushing their hand along the railing carried meaning. A smooth glide suggested they needed grounding. A quicker tap-tap rhythm hinted they were rushing through thoughts. These tiny details strengthened unspoken understanding among neighbours. Outdoors at dusk, residents noticed how lamplight touched nearby buildings. A warm, wide glow offered reassurance. Flickering patches suggested unsettled emotions moving quietly through the street. These impressions guided how people carried themselves into the night. Before bed, many believed that taking one slow breath with their eyes closed, just a moment of intentional stillness, helped separate the day from the darkness ahead. Through these gentle interpretations, formed from sounds, movements, and small behaviours of ordinary things, people continued navigating the occupation with soft resilience, finding meaning in the quiet signals surrounding them. As the occupation stretched into another quiet chapter, people continued finding subtle meaning in the tiniest behaviours of their surroundings, creating gentle beliefs that helped them navigate each day's uncertain mood. Many began paying attention to how doors clicked shut when someone entered a room. A soft, even click suggested the person felt composed, moving with care, but a louder or uneven close hinted that their thoughts were tangled, pulling them away from the moment. Families learned to sense these differences instinctively, adjusting their own movements to match the emotional tone. Indoors, the way fabric draped over chair backs carried significance. A neatly placed shawl or blanket felt like a sign of steady energy. But if the fabric hung at an odd angle or slipped toward the floor, residents sensed distraction or weariness. These small observations offered a quiet way to understand one another without putting anything into words. Outside, the sound of gravel shifting beneath shoes shaped beliefs about the day's atmosphere. If the gravel crunched softly, evenly, residents believed the streets held calm. But if the sound came in sharp, scattered bursts, they sensed tension lingering nearby. This subtle awareness influenced how they stepped into the world, choosing either caution or ease. Children found meaning in the way their shadows behaved during play. If their shadows followed closely and clearly, they whispered that the afternoon would stay peaceful. But if their shadows wavered or blurred across uneven ground, they felt the day carried an edge of unpredictability. Adults let these gentle ideas flourish, knowing they gave children a sense of control. In kitchens, people listened to the soft knock of cupboard doors. A quiet, cushioned close felt reassuring, as if the room held warmth. A firmer thud suggested that thoughts were heavy or unsettled. These small details shaped the rhythm of family interactions, offering early hints about each other's moods. In shared hallways, residents grew attentive to the way whispers travelled. A faint, steady murmur suggested calm conversations behind closed doors. But if voices drifted unevenly, rising and falling, they sensed that emotions were stirring. This unspoken sensitivity helped maintain harmony within close living spaces. Outdoors at dusk, the way light reflected off narrow windows influenced beliefs too. A smooth, golden reflection made the evening feel gentle, but reflections that broke into shifting fragments suggested a restlessness in the air. People carried these impressions with them as they moved through their final tasks of the day. Before bed, many developed a ritual of lightly touching the edge of their pillow before lying down. They believed this tiny gesture signaled to the mind that it was time to let go of the day. Through these small interpretations, formed from sounds, movements, shadows, and the behaviour of ordinary things, people continued finding resilience in subtlety, discovering quiet comfort in the softest signals of their world. As the occupation lingered, people continued relying on small, nearly invisible details to guide their emotions through each day, forming gentle beliefs that helped them feel anchored. Many began noticing how cups sounded when placed onto tables. A cup set down with a soft, muted tap suggested the person felt steady, moving with calm intention. But a cup that landed with a sharper sound hinted at a restless mind, one still processing the weight of earlier hours. These tiny distinctions shaped how families interacted, allowing them to respond with quiet understanding. Indoors, the way someone folded their sleeves carried meaning too. Sleeves rolled slowly and neatly suggested patience and a settled heart, while sleeves pushed up quickly signalled an underlying tension or urgency. Households learned to read these movements instinctively, adjusting the room's atmosphere through softer steps or fewer questions. Outside, people watched how small clusters of dust lifted from the ground when a breeze passed. If the dust rose gently and settled quickly, residents believed the day carried a peaceful tone. But if the dust scattered unpredictably, they sensed a shift, a subtle sign that emotions in the neighbourhood might feel uneven. These observations didn't change anything directly, but they helped people mentally prepare for whatever the day might bring. Children shaped beliefs from the way their toys behaved. If a spinning top moved smoothly across the floor, they felt reassured that the afternoon would remain calm. But if it wobbled early and tipped over suddenly, they whispered that the air felt busy, choosing to stay a little closer to familiar corners. Adults allowed these rituals to exist, knowing they offered comfort. In kitchens, residents found meaning in the sound of dishes being stacked. A slow, steady stacking felt peaceful, like the final notes of a long day. But clinking dishes placed too quickly suggested someone's mind was wandering, caught in thought. These subtle signs helped families regulate their pace, leaning into moments of calm when they appeared. In shared courtyards, the behaviour of hanging ropes or lines influenced beliefs as well. Lines swaying slowly suggested a gentle rhythm across the neighbourhood, but if they twitched sharply in the slightest breeze, people sensed emotional undercurrents moving quietly from home to home. Outdoors at dusk, the faint glow of lanterns or lamps guided interpretations. A warm, steady glow felt reassuring, promising a smooth evening, but a flickering light made residents pause, sensing that the night might carry a mix of thoughts and emotions. Before sleep, many practiced a small ritual they never spoke about, lightly pressing their fingertips against the wall beside their bed. They believed this simple touch grounded their thoughts, helping them release the final tension of the day. Through these delicate, almost whispered beliefs, shaped from sounds, movements, textures, and tiny shifts in the air, people continue to navigate the occupation with quiet resilience, finding steadiness in the softest signs of their world. As the occupation neared another quiet turning point, people continued leaning on the smaller signals around them, forming gentle beliefs that helped them feel steady in a world that offered little certainty. Many began noticing how blankets settled when draped over the back of a couch. If the fabric fell smoothly, without folds or unexpected creases, residents believed the home held a calm energy. But if the blanket bunched or slipped, they sensed a lingering restlessness in the room. These tiny observations helped them decide whether to approach the evening with conversation or quiet company. Indoors, the way someone closed a book influenced subtle interpretations. A slow, thoughtful close felt like acceptance, a moment of settling. But a quicker shut suggested the reader's mind was elsewhere, full of questions or leftover worry. Families learned to read these signals instinctively, adjusting the atmosphere by softening their voices or dimming the lights. Outside, the movement of weeds or grass sprouting between stones offered its own quiet language. If the blades swayed lightly in the wind, residents felt the day held a gentle rhythm. But if they jerked sharply or trembled with each gust, people sensed tension in the air, as though emotions across the neighbourhood were shifting beneath the surface. Children continued creating their own quiet rituals. They believed that if a small stick rolled smoothly when pushed across the ground, the afternoon would stay peaceful. But if it caught on a stone or stopped suddenly, they whispered that the world felt too busy, choosing to play a little closer to home. Adults watched with understanding, appreciating how these gentle beliefs helped children interpret the silence around them. In kitchens, the sound of someone wiping a countertop offered another layer of meaning. A slow, circular motion felt soothing, like a soft attempt to restore order, but a quicker, back-and-forth wipe hinted at unsettled thoughts. These interpretations weren't exact, but they helped guide how families moved around one another. In shared stairwells, people noticed how echoes behaved. A quiet, muted echo made the building feel safe and connected. A sharper, faster echo suggested that someone had rushed through the space, carrying tension. Residents responded by moving more gently, preserving the fragile calm. Outdoors at dusk, the way the last light of the day rested on rooftops shaped beliefs as well. A smooth wash of warm colour felt comforting, a sign that the evening would settle easily. But if the light fractured into scattered reflections, people sensed that the night might bring small emotional shifts. Before bed, Many repeated a tender ritual, smoothing the fabric beneath their pillow with the back of their hand. They believed this gesture created a small moment of peace, guiding their thoughts toward rest. Through these subtle interpretations formed from textures, movements, and quiet signals, people continued navigating the occupation with steady resilience, finding comfort in the most delicate details of their world. As the occupation slowly approached its final, fragile chapters, people found themselves holding even tighter to the gentle beliefs that had helped them endure. They had grown so attuned to small details that even the faintest shift in their surroundings carried soft meaning. Many began noticing how a candle's shadow moved across a nearby wall. If the shadow swayed gently, in a slow, predictable rhythm, residents believed the night would pass quietly. But if the shadow fluttered or jumped with each tiny draft, they sensed that emotions in the home were unsettled, prompting them to speak more softly or sit a little closer to one another. Indoors, the sound of someone exhaling became another subtle sign. A long, even breath suggested release and acceptance, as though the person had found a moment of inner peace. But a shorter, quicker breath hinted at lingering thoughts. These small signals guided how families approached their final moments before sleep. Outside, people noticed how tiny stones shifted when brushed by the wind. If the stones moved slowly, with soft taps against each other, residents felt the world was easing into calm. But if they scattered lightly across the ground, they sensed a restless undercurrent in the air, as if the town itself was waiting. Children still created their own quiet interpretations. They believed that if they placed a feather on a windowsill and it didn't move, the morning would arrive gently. But if the feather wobbled or slipped before bedtime, they whispered that dreams might feel lively or uncertain. Adults never dismissed these beliefs. They understood how much comfort they brought. In kitchens, the way someone placed a cup upside down to dry offered its own message. A carefully centered placement suggested clarity. A slightly uneven one hinted that thoughts were drifting. These interpretations weren't exact, but they helped families care for one another with quiet sensitivity. In shared hallways, people noticed the sound of doors closing for the night. A soft, deliberate close felt reassuring, signalling the building's shared intent to protect its calm. A louder close carried a hint of restlessness, something neighbours acknowledged silently by moving with extra gentleness. Outdoors at dusk, the fading colours of the sky influenced final impressions of the day. A smooth gradient of colour felt calming, as though the world was settling with them. But clouds breaking the light into uneven fragments reminded people that uncertainty still lingered outside. Before sleep, many leaned into one last small ritual, placing their hand briefly on their chest, feeling the rise and fall of their breath. They believed this gesture marked the boundary between the heavy world beyond their walls and the gentle quiet they hoped to carry into their dreams. In these tender interpretations, shaped by shadows, breath, stones, and soft rituals, people found a way to navigate the occupation with quiet resilience. And though the world around them continued shifting, their ability to find meaning in the softest details became a testament to their endurance, one that carried them peacefully toward whatever waited beyond those years.